Hey, it's your host, Bob Pulver. I had the very good fortune to sit down with Charlene Li, a six-time New York Times bestselling author and leading voice in technology-led transformation. I've long admired Charlene's work and perspective, which have consistently shaped how leaders worldwide think about technology's impact on organizations and leadership. Our conversation delved into the exciting world of AI-driven transformation, exploring its distinctions from previous transformation efforts, and examining the crucial importance of responsible AI in maintaining a human-centric approach as work evolves. I'm deeply grateful for Charlene's time and insights, which will undoubtedly provide immense value to many of you as you embark on your AI journey. Stick around until the end. Charlene gives us a sneak peek at both her upcoming HR Tech Conference keynote address and her new book. This is a do not miss episode. Thanks for listening. Hello again, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Elevate Your AIQ. I'm your host, Bob Pulver. Today, I have the pleasure of meeting with Charlene Li. How are you today, Charlene?
I'm doing great, Bob. How are you doing today?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you so much for joining me.
Good to be here.
I could just give you the opportunity to do your own introduction about your background in the space, not just in AI, of course, but digital transformation and your background at Altimeter, et cetera.
I am a New York Times bestselling author of 6 books and soon to be 7. And I started out as an analyst looking at the internet, media, and marketing with Forrester Research. And in 2008, started my own company called Altimeter Group, focused on digital transformation. And then 2015, sold that to Profit Brand Strategy and bounced around in corporate jobs for a little while. And then recently became independent again, going back to my entrepreneurial roots. And I graduated from Harvard College and Harvard Business School. And please don't hold that against me because I do not have a technical degree, but I'm focused much more on business and strategy and leadership, and especially the disruptive impact of different technologies.
Fantastic. I know you've been an avid blogger for quite a while. I won't date you, but I know it goes back quite a number of years and certainly have built up quite an audience online outside of the books.
Yeah, I started blogging actually about 20 years ago this month.
Oh my goodness.
It's been exactly almost 20 years to the date.
That's amazing. So one of the things that I thought would be interesting to kick things off, and we talk about AI-driven, transformation. We talk about, remaining human-centric as we do that. But as we think about transformation, just the concept, that word kind of gets overused. But as you think about what we're experiencing now or what people are setting out to do with this type of transformation, how do you see it comparing and contrasting to what you've seen before with digital transformation or social business transformation or maybe a transformation within a specific line of business or domain?
Yeah, sure. Again, there have been so many types of social business, digital transformation, and they all have something in common, which is some new business trend or technology typically comes along, and it's an opportunity to change the way you normally do things. So it upsets the status quo. And the reason why it feels so disruptive is that it upends the way you think about the world and how you fit into it, because the way you get work done is completely changed. So it's highly disruptive. And the most powerful transformation ones are unfortunately the ones that are also most disruptive. And AI is a huge transformation because the way we work is based on how we know how to do things. And AI can, in many cases, do a better job of doing that than we can as humans. So it upends the way that we do work. It changes the way we relate to each other. And it also calls into question this existential question that if a machine can do it, what's my value? So this transformation is much bigger. And we think of it as a technology transformation, but it's actually like any other transformation that came before it. It's always about people. It's about the digital, which is the technology side, but we forget that the transformation side is about the people and how we have to change.
So in that regard, when you think about what it takes to alter people's behavior and drive sort of a cultural change and things like that, I guess I'm trying to think of in prior transformations, like we sort of deputized people, right? We had champions and change agents and things like that. And there was a lot of grassroots efforts that sort of pushed the organization forward and created some inertia within individual teams. it can't just be bottom up, right?
No, it absolutely can't be. And for one simple reason, it is the potential for transformation and value creation and benefit to the organization and its customers and employees, all its various stakeholders, is huge. And if you just let little pockets of it spring up, you'll see little pockets and little bits of impact. So, sure, we can write better marketing copy with AI. But what if you were to rethink the entire marketing process, the way you actually engage with customers? That's a more strategic question. And that can't be driven by grassroots. So the opportunities to completely rethink the way you get work done, how you engage with customers, how you deliver products or even develop new products and services is possible because of AI. You can do things now and create new companies and new products and services with no new people, no additional costs, and in a fraction of the time. So unless you look at it strategically that way, you'll never get to that point by boiling it up from the bottom up.
So you would argue that now that we're entering sort of strategic planning time of year, that this needs to be front and center, right? Your AI strategy aligned to your business, your technical, and your talent strategies.
We have a saying, think big, start small, scale fast. And oftentimes we're forgetting the first part. We're just starting small and hoping we can figure out what to scale. Without that big thinking and aligning it to your strategic opportunities and what your strategy is overall as a business, you'll never get to a point where it becomes strategic. So it's a chicken and an egg here.
Yeah.
And that most executives don't feel comfortable with AI. They think of it as a technology rather than as a transformational strategy. And so therefore, say it's not my job, it's my CIO's job or somebody over in digital, instead of thinking, oh, this could completely transform our business.
Absolutely. So when you prepare an organization, as you talk to leaders of different organizations, and I'm sure you did this part of research for your new book and for all the great newsletters that you've been publishing. I mean, it just seems like everyone wants to make sure they've got some voice and some, proverbial, seat at the table, but they may not know what they're actually asking for and what it's going to take to be in that position and contribute meaningfully by getting their own hands dirty and upskilling themselves in what's possible. How do you see people embracing this at a leadership level to make sure that their eyes are wide open and they understand that they have the opportunity here to really get ahead of this and lead by example and learn these skills and become AI literate themselves?
Yeah, I think you're pointing to a really important requirement, which is the C-suite, the top leaders. I like to think about the top two levels of leadership in your organization. They need to have AI literacy. And that isn't just having gone in and used ChatGPT once or twice. I call it bridging the knowing, doing, leading gap. You know about it. Are you actually doing it, using it in a way that it has transformed the way you actually work? Because until you can see the power of AI directly benefiting you, you can't begin to think about how to lead an organization in using AI. So I oftentimes speak to audiences or executive teams and I ask, how many of you know about it? Hands go up. How many of you use it? Hands go up. How many of you use it every day? All the hands go down.
Yeah.
You cannot begin to transform the organization unless you have transformed yourself in the way you work at it. And so I have training for executives and do workshops and get them to use AI to do the things they already know how to do. And that's primarily in creating content, to do research, and very importantly, to use it as a sounding board. Because as a leader, one of the scarcest resources is a peer. Somebody you can say, well, what about this? What about that? Here's my plan. Evaluate it. How could it be better? And using it as that sounding board to just up-level your work is a hugely strategic use of AI for executives and leaders.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think back to some of the transformations that I went through at IBM, where we made sure that, as people bought into the concept of design thinking and that methodology, that it wasn't just the designers that went through that, it was all the product managers and the product teams had to go through that, and all the executives had to go through that so that they could start to rethink how they can make longer lasting change and make better strategic decisions and not just worry about tactics and quarterly metrics and things like that. And then even product management and some of the principles behind good fundamentals of product management and agile were important for people who were not product managers to learn how to do that. So I feel like this is just maybe that cranked up to to 11 at least to learn how to use AI, just because AI, I don't think of it as a tool, but more a toolkit that can do a lot of different things depending on the use case and the domain.
The design thinking approach that you talked about at IBM, what I loved about it is that I got trained on design thinking by IBM as an analyst covering the company. And so, and I think that's what's happening with AI now. The best companies are training people on how to use AI responsibly. And so, because they want to ensure that everybody inside of their ecosystem is using AI in a responsible way, is treating customer and employee data in a responsible way. So they can then, with full conviction, say to customers, yes, we are protecting everything. We're using AI in a responsible and ethical way, up and down throughout the entire system.
Absolutely. When we think about the opportunities with AI, and I use AI more broadly than just generative AI, I know that's top of mind for a lot of folks, including many of my listeners. But when we think of AI more broadly and the ways in which it can be used, for the people that you've spoken to, the leaders that you've spoken to around how they've adopted it, are they still starting too small and not thinking big enough and boldly enough about how to do this? Are they scared that they're not going to know how to measure success?
Hey friends, Marnie Robbins here, host of Vibe Makers, a podcast now on the Work Defined Network. Look, we all know workplace culture doesn't come from a slide deck. Gross. It comes from people. So on Vibe Makers, I talk to the folks shaping the experience of work from the inside out. You know, the HR and people ops folk, founders, leaders, and misfits building culture through small bets, big beliefs, and a whole lot of trial and error. No fluff. Well, maybe a little fluff, but mainly just candid talk about what happens when you stop duct taping your culture together. Come check us out. Listen to Vibe Makers wherever you get your podcasts.
All of the above. It's so easy looking at the productivity and efficiency gains from AI. So like, hey, if I can just take the productivity gains, I get 10, 20, 30%, maybe even exponential levels of productivity. I'm going to use that. It's low-hanging fruit. Why not do that? But I think you're missing an opportunity. And this is the key question around where do you aim for and how do you measure the benefit? And I keep coming back to your existing business strategy. And the reason why people don't think about it this way is because they typically are not thinking about business strategy on a day-to-day basis. They have their heads down, they're doing their job, they have your OKRs that are very poorly written, very much department or team oriented, not business oriented. And so they don't really know how to think about the strategic opportunities because they don't think about strategy. And so it falls to a few people who are the least qualified to actually think about the AI because they're just thinking about the strategy and not necessarily the gaps that are between where you are today and where you want to be. And that's what strategy is all about. Like, how are we going to get from where we are today to where we want to be in the future? And AI, using AI very strategically to say, how do we plug those gaps? How do we use it to accelerate or defend our strategy, our go-to-market? And then the way you measure it is, are we getting to our strategy better and faster? So you use your existing most important KPIs to measure the effectiveness of AI. And it's a highly, highly relevant to the organization because it's strategic. And again, it just really highlights the fact that most organizations are not strategic in the way that they operate, in the way they think. And so in order to use AI strategically, you have to be a strategic, focused company.
I'm guessing you've got some companies that you've spoken to that are just, maybe they're not firing on all cylinders, but they're at least doing better than most and have some best practices that perhaps you could share.
Yes, one of my favorites is the AARP. So it's really focused on serving its members. It's a membership nonprofit organization that's focused on people age 50 and above. and then especially people who are in retirement thinking about that advanced age, health, financials, everything. And so they started thinking about how can we use AI to be more effective in our communications to them? How can we, instead of having a couple different types of newsletters, because it's a huge range of interests from 50 years old and onwards. Some people are still working, other people have various family different situations. So how can we granularly communicate to people their needs and put in front of them all of the services and support that AARP offers? And so they're using AI. And in the beginning, it was a small group of just 3 people setting the strategy, but it all tied back to, again, their purpose and their strategy in serving its members. Everything tied back to that. So yes, there were productivity gains and efficiency gains. They were focused internally, but it was always with the goal of serving its members better. So having that focus right from the very beginning directed all the other groundswell efforts from people, because they had an opportunity. If you want to use AI, fill out this form and review it and get back to you within a few days. And they would approve these things constantly because people were given very, very clear instructions. Use AI for this purpose. Use it to help us engage in our customers better. Help us find ways to do things more efficiently so we can engage with our customers better. So everything was focused on that strategic goal that they had.
Yeah, I guess I'm a little surprised that that's the organization that's showing everyone how it's done. But that's a great example. I think a lot of what you just described is actually falls under this umbrella of responsible innovation, right? So it's I spent a lot of time in responsible AI, which is really about the governance. It's almost in some ways sort of this like defensive strategy, but it doesn't have to be that way. You can be responsible, adhere to legislation and guidelines and ethical expectations or whatever, and still innovate. Like you can walk and chew gum at the same time. People have been doing it for a long time. There's more to think about, but there's also a ton of opportunity. And if you educate, part of this sort of upskilling and educating people to advance their ability to work with AI and understand how to use AI properly, you're undoubtedly going to get a lot of ideas. And now you got to figure out which ones of these, make sense, which ones are relevant within a particular domain or a particular role, and which ones could be adopted more broadly or even commercialized. You've got this dual benefit of not only mitigating risk within your own organization by having people use the technology properly for your own operations, but you're also going to ignite a lot of promising ideas. I mean, some of them might be far-fetched and some of them might be sort of incremental innovation, but there's a lot of value in every direction by making your people more aware of what's possible and guiding you in a strategic direction that makes sense and maintains, some competitive edge.
Yeah. I see a lot of companies still banning the use of AI in their organizations. And when I talk to people in those organizations, they're all using it.
Right.
This is not using it in a sanctioned way, which is a problem because by just saying no to everything, presumably turning it off, you're pushing it underground and you have no visibility. You're much better off making it visible, making sure that people are using it in a responsible way, which means giving them training, giving them guidelines, and more importantly, using it in a strategic way to say, use AI to do this. Don't use it to do that. Like you may want to go do that because it's interesting, but it doesn't really help us. Focus instead on using it this way. And here's the training, here are the tools. Like focus on here. And I remember one organization that just said, we're going to become AI ready. We're going to become AI first. This is an imperative for us. It's a fairly large organization, about 600 people. And the CEO came out and said, we're going to give you all training. Here's a list of all the approved tools. If you want new tools, here's a process, and we try to streamline that. And then we're going to have a dashboard with every single person's name on it. And next to each name, we'll have a light. There'll be a green light if you're using these tools all the time. There's a yellow light if you're using them, still trying to figure it out, but at least you're in the game. And you get a red light if you're not using any of these tools. And he threw down the gauntlet at that point. He said in 6 months' time, there would be no more red lights employed at this company.
I want to take a break real quick just to let you know about a new show we've just added to the network. Up Next at Work, hosted by Gene and Kata Keel of the Devon Group. Fantastic show. If you're looking for something that pushes the norm, pushes the boundaries, has some really spirited conversations, Google Up Next at Work, Gene and Kata Keel from the Devon Group.
Have you ever wondered what really makes a generation tick? Who gets to pick the name? And why the slang keeps changing? Don't worry, I can help. My name's Dr. Megan Grace. On #GenZ, I share the voices and experiences of Generation Z, how they're different from other generations, what moves them, and why they do what they do. In each episode, we go beyond the buzzwords and the stereotypes to dive into real conversations and the insights that matter to making intergenerational collaboration a reality. You can catch #GenZ on the Work Defined Podcast Network and wherever you listen to podcasts.
And he was saying, look, you have to learn how to use these tools. It is a given to the future success of not only our company, but for you as an employee, anywhere you work. And if you're not willing to do this in advance to becoming at least a yellow light, then we're going to have another conversation that this may not be the right place for you.
Right.
But no matter what, there'll be no more red lights at this company in 6 months.
Well, my guess would be after those 6 months and there's no more red lights, there probably won't be that many yellow lights either. Right, because you don't want to. He's going to move the goalpost, and no one's going to want to fall behind below that line.
Yeah, well, I mean, the reality is there are some jobs where generative AI doesn't really help you that much, and it may be already built into the tools, and you just use it. But it's not something that everybody will be using all the time necessarily. But at least you're familiar with it, and when you want to use it, and when you're not wanting to use it. But at least you'll have your hands in it. You know how it works. You appreciate to know if something was created by AI, what to do with it too as well. So just becoming AI literate. The way I like to think about it is if you have a new employee, you wouldn't just necessarily trust everything that they put out. You'd want to review it. And AI is like that. You don't want it to just necessarily take it at face value. You want to review it. And at some point, you begin to trust it even more. And in just going back to your whole point about responsible AI, this is not about slowing things down. AI regulations, all these things, that in governance is sort of a dirty word inside of organizations. It really is about speeding things up. Because if you have clear guidelines on what quality means, what safety and security means, what it means to build trust in this technology, once you have that trust, then you can move much, much faster. If you're constantly doubting, does everyone know how to use this? Are there any hallucinations in here? Do people have the critical thinking skills to use this in the right way? Then you're not trusting either the people or the technology. But if you have a foundation of responsible and ethical use of AI, then trust starts being built in the organization and you can move much, much faster.
Absolutely. Organizations need to set the policy, but I just feel like it's a matter of time before this is just part of your onboarding and annual or whatever frequency, training that everyone should be going through, just like they went through with harassment and data privacy and cybersecurity. I mean, what's your take? I mean, isn't it just a matter of time before this is added to that list?
Yes. Again, I know that one organization, HP, does a regular training for all its people on safety, security, use of data, especially if you have access to information. And built into that is the use of AI into that training too as well. So when you have a regular training cadence and education cadence for people, then this becomes an easy way to build it in. It isn't just when you're on board, but it's a regular part of just your access to, in order to be certified to use things like customer data or employee data, you have to be trained and reminded, this is how you take care of things. So again, the power of AI is very much based on what data you have access to, but also what you do with it. And so do you pass it off as your own? Do you review it? What are the safeguards that you have to put in place to make sure it's being used well? And those are things, again, that can, to some degree, get created it from the bottom up, but it needs to have some sort of consistency and alignment across the organization. That can only happen from the top down.
No, I absolutely agree. I know you've written about setting up like AI ethics committees and things like that, which of course I'm a huge proponent of. Could you just unpack that thought a little bit and just talk about like who should be on that committee and what their responsibility should be? I mean, is it part of an AI center of excellence, or is it just completely independent? Because I think people will be concerned about yet another sort of gatekeeper to get something deployed or what have you.
I tend to stay away from an AI center of excellence because it says that there's a single way to do things. We're way too early for that in some ways. And so I separate it and call it the minimal viable team that you need to put together your AI strategy. Now, that's very difficult than when you're operating and executing. But to pull together that strategy, you want somebody clearly from the digital and technology side, not necessarily IT, because IT typically is keeping the lights on, maintaining things, not necessarily innovating with things. So the most innovative technology thinkers in the organization. You want somebody who is the most strategic person you can get to be on this team. Ideally, the CEO, the head of strategy, somebody who understands your strategic objectives. You want somebody who can represent your customer and commercial interests. So it has a view for how customers' needs and expectations are changing because of AI and what the impact of anything that you do. You could include somebody from product, so you can start understanding what's going to be required. And very importantly, you need somebody from HR. Because this is a people transformation you're talking about. Do you have the skills? How are you going to be changing jobs? How are career ladders going to change? Now, notice who is not on this team: legal, risk. And the reason is because they play a very important role. But unless they can be in the room and say, and temper their need to say no to things.
Right.
If they're in the room and can say, yeah, we can do that, and here are the things we're going to have to do and ensure to make sure it's safe. If they can be a proactive partner, then they can be in the room. Otherwise, for the most part, I encourage people to keep them off of that initial team and to keep them absolutely informed, get them to write the responsible AI and ethical approaches, because they absolutely need to do that. And as you come up with a strategy, keep them involved, bring them in to say, well, these are the safeguards we want to have. How do we include that and actually put that into execution? So the concern is that you have to get legal and risk and security involved right from the very beginning. And the reality is, if you can demonstrate that you are approaching this in a responsible and ethical way with some basic guidelines to say, we are not going to execute anything. We're always going to come back and we will keep these guidelines in mind as we go through this. And we're constantly staying in touch with you. But we need to think very openly, very much in a brainstorming fashion without saying no to opportunities. And that is your job, is to say no, is to put these safeguards in. And we don't need that in the room right now.
Yeah.
Now, as the strategy comes together, then you absolutely have to include them. But in that initial group, give yourself some breathing room. And instead of constantly thinking about all the things that can go wrong, think about how you can be curious, how you can have imagination brought into the process to imagine a very, very different future.
Yeah. No, I really like your train of thought there. This is different. And what we need here are, to your point, people from different domains, different lines of business, and with the cognitive diversity to understand where there might be some implications to protected category of workers, or whatever you need to do to make sure that you're thinking, deeply and broadly about, adverse impact and fairness and transparency and things of that nature. So I think what I tell people and what you described, I think are complementary.
Are you tired of talent and HR podcasts that sound like corporate training videos? Same. Talentless is the no-fluff show about hiring, leadership, culture, and what's actually going on in the world of work. Talentless is a podcast for recruiters by recruiters. Hosted by Desiree Goldie and Ashley King, they're smart, occasionally salty, and never afraid to say what everyone else is thinking. Listen wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe at talentlesspodcast.com.
One of the things that has come up is around the phrase responsible AI kind of entered at least my vocabulary around the time that generative AI came in. People have those two things sort of linked together. But responsible AI is much bigger than any particular legislation that is just now coming out. And it's not only generative AI. Responsible AI is how you're using any autonomous, algorithmic, or artificial intelligent, system to help, make decisions and draw conclusions, right? So are you seeing a similar observation where people are sort of conflating, or inappropriately directly associating with responsible AI to generative AI?
Yes, and again, it's completely understandable because it's the most visible, relatable, usable example of AI that we can actually use and access without being a technologist. And so if you think about the true power of AI is when you have generative AI as a front end, from the interaction point of view, and then be able to access all this powerful, traditional, is what I call it, AI, like machine learning or natural language processing. All those things become much more accessible and even more powerful with generative AI layered on top of it. So it's this melding of all of these AIs together. We don't say responsible generative AI, we say responsible AI. Because it's encompassing everything. But the real focus right now is because it is so much more accessible, because it is now democratized. It's a different level of responsibility and care that needs to be in place because anybody with a mobile phone, anybody with a browser can go use this. And it's sort of like, it's reminded me of the early days of social media. Anybody can set up a Facebook account. Anybody could go out there and start a blog. And you can do a lot of damage if you're not careful.
I'm glad you brought that up because I know people have been sort of bouncing around what is the proper sort of analogy, I guess innovations from a technology standpoint. I mean, is generative AI like, the internet? Is it like social media? I happen to think social media is a really powerful one. It sounds like you do too, just because I feel like the guardrails that were set for social media use within organizations, and the fact that some of them did the same thing that some of them are doing with AI, which is, nobody's going on Facebook or Twitter, you're at work, right? They just didn't even see the B2B, use case for it back in the early days. So I don't know. I think social media is the more appropriate analogy.
Yeah, agreed. Again, people ask me, how do you tell that this is a technology trend that's going to be a big deal? And I go, well, I can tell you that things like blockchain or augmented reality or Web3 were not going to be that big because they didn't have this component of transformation with them. They're going to be very important underlying technologies, but they don't fundamentally change the power dynamics and the relationships between each other and the technology. That it happened with the internet. Absolutely. Power structures were completely obliterated. Same thing with social, to some degree with mobile. And then especially with AI, the fact that we have this incredibly powerful tool now at our fingertips. Anybody can use it. Anybody can write programs now. I can write apps and programs for the first time in my life. It's an incredible, powerful sense of capability and being able to have agency that just didn't exist before. We can now set up companies and launch new products and services so much faster than we could before. And the people who are benefiting from this are the ones who are agile enough, to your point before, agility, being able to work in a very different way is probably the most important characteristic of success for AI. If organizations are already gone through digital transformation, and I mean not just digitize their transactions, but actually work in a transformed way, they're in a much better position to be able to take advantage of this new generative AI technology.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think that companies, when it comes to data, and you talked about hallucinations before and being able to trust these systems, I think that organizations that are more mature from a data and analytics perspective are also in a much better position, especially as you build proprietary, models, or you bring something in house and you build with it, or it's just getting additional, training with your, proprietary data. You're just going to be in a much better position if you have better data quality and data governance and things like that.
And it's not only data quality and data governance, it's also, do you have data literacy? Because data used to be the domain of an inner sanctum of pointy-headed analytics people, right? And if you wanted to get some analysis, you would go knocking very quietly on the door. Can we bother you? Can we bother you to run this piece of report for us? And now with these tools, you have the potential of giving anybody access to these tools to be able to run the data. But with that comes great responsibility also. So who has access to what data to do what with it and make what decisions? And if you already have a culture of responsible use of data and access to data and training on how to do that, it's a lot easier than if people have never been able to access data before and don't know what to do with it. It's incredibly powerful, could be incredibly dangerous. But again, not having a PhD in data and analytics and data sciences, it's not a requirement anymore to be able to draw insights. Instead, the biggest requirement is that you have an interesting question that data could potentially answer. So can we train people on how to ask these interesting questions that will make a difference in them making better decisions on behalf of the organization, on behalf of their customers?
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. Because I think the other thing about, when I think about the learning curve with generative AI, and like you said, this is the first time that people have actually been able to interact with it. That, the UI is the AI, right? But it's also the user manual and the help section, the community forum, all rolled into one, right? So you're running out of excuses to start to get in there and get your hands dirty, because if you're stuck, you can immediately get unstuck, right? Without leaving your keyboard and your screen.
Answers in there someplace.
Right.
You just
Right.
have to be able to ask the right question.
Exactly. So I was just curious, this could be, for personal use or in your work. Are there any particular, tools or use cases besides the usual, ChatGPT and Claude or whatever that you're finding particularly useful or interesting?
Yes, I like using the My GPT features within ChatGPT. Also, Claude has something similar called projects. And the idea is that you can customize. And we oftentimes use this idea of prompt engineering to make the results better. So there's all sorts of tutorials on how to get the most out of your LLM, out of the models. But if you find that you're doing a certain amount of tasks over and over again, so for example, I'm constantly writing content and I want the AI to understand my writing style, my past writing content. So I upload all of my content. I uploaded my last book. I give it all of the articles I've written, every newsletter I've written over the past 4 years. It's all in there. And as a result, it understands a full picture of me, and the instructions I give it are very specific to what I'm looking for. So I have a couple different versions of this to do different things. And it's a nice way to customize the LLM, but use its base trained model, its very powerful model, to do things very specifically to you. So sometimes I'll go in with an executive team and we'll create models, custom models for each member of that team with their writings, with their strategic plans, the way that they talk and present. Again, using publicly available information, nothing proprietary. And it becomes instantly usable for them because it writes in their voice. It thinks like them. It understands all its prior thinking, so it can be that great thought partner. And so I think it's one of the most powerful things you can do with this. Don't settle for the same GPT that everyone else is using. Make your own.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic advice. I know I've tried to do some customization, even just for my podcast episode summaries. I certainly don't want to repeat, titles or, summaries and things like that. Even if we've touched on similar topics with different guests, I mean, there's always a different perspective and a different angle to take. But yeah, I can imagine for someone who is such an avid, blogger and writer, that that would be extremely helpful to have that sort of writing co-pilot with you.
But even as an executive, I think for you, again, assuming that you have a version that is not being used to train the model, you have all those safety and privacy controls set up correctly, then you might feel very comfortable uploading your strategic plan, a competitive analysis, your marketing plan, your latest presentation to the team, various correspondences or brand stories and guidelines, so that you have the full knowledge of everything you would want somebody to know to help you be a better leader. So it's almost like having this sort of personal board of directors to help you do your job better, and it's sitting right there, and you can call on it to do anything from writing to researching to, again, sounding off on various ideas you may have in full context of what you are trying to accomplish as a leader. So I think the value here is for any leader who is constantly thinking strategically. And it's not just to create content, it's to help you think in new and better and different ways.
No, I totally agree. Awesome. So, Charlene, I know you have a couple exciting things coming up. You've got a keynote coming up for HR Tech. And then, of course, as you mentioned, your seventh book, which we are eagerly anticipating. What inside info are you willing to share for either of those?
I'm almost afraid to say it because I'm going to jinx myself. I'm trying to create a digital avatar, a digital twin of myself, and that will help me present at HR Tech. And if all goes well, I will connect it hopefully to my private database, my private chatbot, and it'll also be able to answer questions in real time on its own. So just having that kind of technology and showcasing it, right, at a place where you can now really create training, for example, inside an organization that's highly customized to each person. We've all gone through just really long, tedious training inside of our organizations, and there's no reason why learning can't be more compelling and more engaging. So if you could create customized training with a live instructor or even with a digital instructor and have it even tell jokes and add humor, which is very, very difficult for AI to do, it would be a really interesting engagement and provide scale in ways that wouldn't be possible. And the new book is much more workmanlike. It's step by step taking you through what do you do first, second, third, fourth to have a compelling strategy for generative AI. And we'll focus specifically on generative AI because it's the newest thing that's out there. It's the layer that sits on top of any existing AI. It's the one that has the most transformational power inside of your organization because anybody can use it. So it requires a strategic approach to that. And we start with everything from just literacy and creating a foundation with responsible AI to auditing your strategy to nuts and bolts of how to set up your data and technology so that it can scale. So nuts and bolts, everything you need to know from beginning to end to at least get you started on the path to having a coherent strategy.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are struggling to figure out. They're already overwhelmed and they don't know where to begin. And so it sounds like a really important, practical guide that people get a lot of value from. So congratulations on that. And looking forward to reading it, and definitely looking forward to seeing you at HR Tech. I did just book my trip, so we'll be there in person, and I'm anxious to see it. Charlene, any other final thoughts about elevating your AIQ? I think we covered that pretty well over this conversation.
Yeah, we covered a lot of stuff here today, Bob. I think the only advice I give to people is that the biggest impediment to using AI, and specifically generative AI, is a lack of imagination. So get really curious with it. Try a lot of different things with it. And it is constantly changing. And if you don't see the technology working in the way you want, go and advocate and say, I really wanted to do this. And most likely, either somebody will show you how to do it that way, or vendors will oh, I'm going to start paying attention to this and actually deliver it that way. I think the smartest thing that organizations to do is to build to buy, meaning they're going to start building some of these custom tools with the intention of being able to buy it from a vendor in the future. But because they know they're going to buy and not build the tools from scratch, it's being a more thoughtful, thorough buyer, more knowledgeable buyer, simply because you're starting to use these tools to build them too as well.
No, I think that's fantastic advice. I mean, I think once the buyers are smarter about what they want, they'll make sure that those, the vendors, build things that solve real problems and not just put shiny objects out there to distract us all. So that's a great closing thought. Charlene, thank you so much for taking time to educate me and my listeners. Greatly, greatly appreciate it. And looking forward to seeing you at HR Tech.
See you soon.
Thanks again, Charlene. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you next time.